Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
And so Simon Harris and Peadar Tobin, they had a good debate today on leaders' questions. They were talking about the EU migration pact. Peadar says Ireland signed up to many agreements that we cannot keep. As a result, we're being fined millions of euros per year. He listed off wastewater, environment, dairy brine, wind farm, money laundering, directive, media services, etc. Um, Peadar says the government has failed to differentiate between migrants who need help and those who don't. And the question was, how much is the EU migration pact going to cost us? And Simon didn't give an answer.
That's right. It was an interesting debate. Peadar Tobin is very well qualified. He got a degree in commerce and politics. And then he got a business degree from the Smurford School of Economics. So he's well qualified in what he's engaged in the Dáil. And so he does a lot of research. He apparently knows what to ask. And I must say, I was amazed. By the way, as I was speaking, I hope I'm not starting, but I hope people that like what we have to say might make a comment at the tail when we're finished. It'd be much appreciated to see what they think and their views in a respectful fashion, of course. Now, Peadar, as I say, is a very talented and educated man. Now, the Taoiseach, the new Taoiseach, uh, was shaping up, I think, all right, and he's busy now meeting important, and he has to go to Europe to meet people in the European community. But the questions and the amount of fines that Ireland has suffered, millions, and I was amazed that the media that are so in touch with whatever it is that's supposed to be in touch, that they hadn't managed to do any research on this because this is a small country with a population coming to about 12%. They say it could be 15% of people from other jurisdictions, and we know little or nothing about any of them. So Peadar asked the question, and it was relevant. And I would expect when I ask a question of a leader responsible for all this and part of a government, heretofore ministers, that he might get an answer relevant to what it was, but he actually didn't. He got something about the fact that we're in the EU. Well, we know we're in the EU and how praiseworthy it is when in fact twice in referendums we voted no about it. The international and all the rest of it. So we didn't like the direction it was going. But it wasn't respected. There was more votes and so on and so forth. So we're just talking about democracy in the full sense of the word. So when I ask a question of somebody, for example, I'm asking directions to such a place, I expect to get a relevant answer, not a whole heap of questions about something else other than what I asked. Same way as going into a shop and I go in for an item, and suddenly somebody from another jurisdiction starts yapping about other products. So, like this kind of thing is not suitable. You want answers to questions. Now, Peadar asked questions, and I must say I was amazed at the amount of fines this country suffered because this is a green country. As I noticed myself driving all around the country, very little places do I see where there's smoke coming out of factories. We don't have those type of places. As far as I know, if we have one or two, it's the height of it. So this is a very what would I call it? A good country from the point of view of all that sort of thing. There's no one factories of throwing out smoke like other countries have. And we're on the island, so we have the Atlantic going towards America. So we're a very safe country from that point of view. But the EU seems to have a different angle on this, according to Peadar Tobin, about environment and this, that, and the other. So um, it would have been a good thing for Simon Harris, the new Taoiseach, to try and answer those questions and to say that they have appealed them and they are exorbitant, or that they're actually that he's new on the job, but he intends to sort of have it dealt with. But I didn't hear that. I heard something about how wonderful the EU is when there's question marks about it. Not everybody thinks the way he thinks. And we think that if they're finding us all this money, are they finding other countries? Is
I
this
think,
why
John,
Britain maybe left?
I think when it
Huh?
comes to the fines he was talking about, like he mentioned wastewater, environment, Derry Bryan, wind farm, money laundering directive, media services
There's
directive,
the
there
money
was about three
laundering
or
that you can do.
four more others. But the thing about it is, I think like if we're not meeting these targets, that means somebody's setting the bar too high. Who's setting the bar too high that we can't meet these commitments? Because it appears that's what's wrong here, or else we don't have the resources to meet the commitments. I think the question about the EU migration pact and how much it's going to cost, it would be a difficult one to quantify, and I'd say they'll quantify it in the future because they'll after today's leaders questions they'll simply have to.
Well, you see, there's more questions than answers as far as I see, and I don't think that's a way to run a business. And a country is another business, and there's people there elected to deal with these issues and deal with them in a practical and a decent way and showing respect for each other and that type of thing. Now, Peadar asked the questions, and they are very necessary to have answers. And it would behove Simon Harris as the new Taoiseach. He's very immersed in politics. Um, as I say, Peadar has many good qualifications to be able to sort of deal with these type of issues. Would that he was actually in the pilot seat, that he would be able with his intelligence and his experience in training in that sort of area of politics and commerce, he might be able to deal with that and answer questions in a practical way. But suffice to say that Simon Harris is new, and we hope that he'll grow into it and be successful. Because at the end of the day, that's what we wish, and that's what we'd like to have. Now, the first thing to say about Simon Harris, when he's Minister for Health, he'd want to revisit this business of James Street for a children's hospital. As Peadar Tobin mentioned, it's cost 2.5 billion so far, and God knows what the price tag is going to be about it. Now, Simon Harris is the new Taoiseach, the new stroke Prime Minister, and he has a chance to undo that and put it to some other use for, like the Mayo Clinic in California, for wealthy people that can be looked after with consultants and so on and so forth, and a children's hospital built in a green environment like Blanchardstown, the Connolly Hospital, plenty of grounds there that's nice and healthy, 2 or 3 stories high and not all in one building, in a couple of separate buildings, because children are often have different types of needs by way of operations and to be dealt with, God help them. So certainly James Street is not the healthiest place to my way of thinking to be. It'd have to be all air conditioning to my way of thinking. And that's not healthy for anyone, is it?
It's not absolutely. So I think
So
like I think when you look at it, when you look at Simon Harris and you look at Peadar, you got two very good leaders there. I was watching them today, and I thought, well, you know what? We're in a great country, but we also have very, very good leaders of parties. You got two statesmen debating something there. It got a little bit personal at times, which wasn't nice. They should cut that out. But the thing about it is, it was great to see two intelligent people going at it from a debate point of view. I think that Simon reminds me in his articulation, he reminds me of a young Tony Blair, the way he can really get his point across so well. And of course, then you got Peadar, who's full of energy and he just wants to put so many things on the table in front of him, and there isn't enough time in leaders' questions. But it's very interesting to watch them, and I think, as we said in our first video to welcome Simon, that he's quite a formidable leader of a party, and I think he'll actually make a very good leader, provided his there's action behind his words.
Yes, and I think if he dealt one example of what I consider a very good pragmatic leader that was able to deal with all sorts of issues was Bertie Ahern. When he was Minister for Labour, he was the first Minister for Labour that was able to bring unions together with opposing views. And after his business of being Minister for Labour, there was none of these strikes that were seen to be threatened all the time. So he had an ability to get things done and to get show some kind of common sense. He had great common sense, Bertie, and that's very much of a requirement as well, aside from whatever it is that they are dealing with and so on and so forth. I think straightforward answering questions is the thing, not this political speak that at the end of the day you don't know what actually they're saying. They're not answering the question in full sense of the word, because if we're being fined millions by this EU, what are we doing in a place like that that's costing us such an amount of money? And then this business of a pact with regard to immigrants and all the rest of it. I mean, how did they expect a country to be able to accommodate, considering we have a problem with houses? With the price of houses, and not enough for Irish people that they can afford to buy a house and rent an apartment. That needs to be looked at, and I hope Simon Harris begins to treat these opposition parties with what I call respect, the way Bertie did, and and then maybe invite him to sort of perhaps meet him in his office, and so they can have a chat and get to know where they're coming from, that type of thing. Isn't that the way to do business in any organization, to sort of deal with people that have opposing views and so on and so forth? Meet them kind of, and try to thrash things out. And if the what Peadar asked about all these fines, I mean, we're a small country. We're not an industrial nation in the full sense of the word. We're actually an agricultural country, and a very green, pleasant island. A lot better than what's abroad in some of the countries. They're overcrowded, some of them. Whereas we generally have a very nice, pleasant, with mountains and scenery and sea and all the rest of it, and our water's as clean as a whistle, generally speaking. You can swim in them in confidence. Can you do that in other countries? You don't know what's going into them because of in the Mediterranean, for example. There's so many countries around it that mightn't be as well developed as some of the countries in Europe. These are just some of the things that we can talk about, but we're not attached to Europe in that sense. We're an island, if you like, adrift. If we were a ship, we'd be floating somewhere else. So, but I think in the Dáil, there isn't what I think is enough information or whatever it is. Peadar is able to do his research and present his questions in a chronological order. I'm sure Simon Harris will grow into the job. He's new on it, and he's meeting all these VIPs. I think it's better to try and get your feet on the ground in the Dáil government, in Leinster House, in the government, and then get your information in such a way as Albert Rennes used to get. He wanted, he didn't want a whole heap of papers, just whatever he had to deal with in one sheet. And I think the media and some of those started to make fun of it. That's how stupid they are. So you've got to get things and deal with the questions that you're asked, assuming it's a question that you can answer, and that the people that's in the various civil servants, civil servant offices, that actually advise the government in many respects. But Simon is a politician now for many years, is a young man even. So let's hope that he begins to grow into it like Bertie Ahern. And one thing about Bertie Ahern, he was the only member in that Dáil that on a Ash Wednesday had ashes on his forehead and the sign of the cross. Now that struck me as very unusual, assuming that I presume most of them would have been baptized as Catholics, that they didn't see fit to have have ashes on an Ash Wednesday the way we all do, and when we're trying to live our lives in the great way. I just mentioned something, if I may, about the way things started developing here in a certain direction. The first thing to say is that Maud Gonne. Have you heard of Maud Gonne?
I have indeed.
She was a great patriot. Well, Maud Gonne, the Irish nationalist and convert to Catholicism, wrote, I believe every political movement on earth has its counterpart in the spirit world, and the battles we fight here have perhaps been already fought out on another plane, and great leaders often draw their unexplained power from this. I cannot conceive a material movement that has not a spiritual basis. It was this that drew me so powerfully towards the Catholic Church. Now, there's a great statement from somebody that wasn't baptized or brought up as a Catholic, coming to appreciate it. And here's another one with Pádraig Pearse. Now, this is the foundation of the state. Just listen to this. And this is the sort of view that I would like to see expressed by the political elite in the Dáil. For Pádraig Pearse, the concept of nationhood was inseparable.
You okay?
Bloody thing, imagine ringing.
Yeah. That
At
was
this
Simon
point
ringing
in
you.
time. But anyways, just reading this. Some
Start
goodness,
off again there, Pádraig Pearse. Yes, good barrister. Go ahead.
Pádraig Pearse, the concept of nationhood was inseparable from the concept of spirit and soul. He argued, I believe that there is a spiritual tradition which is the soul of Ireland, the thing which makes Ireland a living nation. He continued, they have conceived of nationality as a material thing, whereas it is a spiritual thing. Pearse insisted that a nation is knit together by natural ties, ties mystical and spiritual, ties human and kindly. The nation is the family in large, the nation of God. Now, this is what Pádraig Pearse said that paid for his life with what they did in the GPO and all executors. So you take your inspiration from that.
I
If you're
think when you look at Pádraig Pearse and people of that era, I mean, he was a great legislator, but he was also a barrister, so the depth of his understanding of language and words and legislation, he had a granular understanding of, well, I suppose, I mean, he wrote the Constitution, the Proclamation, or part of it. So I would put him in a different. I don't think there's anybody of that league in government. I really don't.
well, that's the inspiration that they should follow and not go down the road that they're doing. You can't turn your back on that end of it that Pádraig Pearse outlined and Maud Gonne, these great leaders and of our fight for freedom, which thanks to them we got, and others followed, and that's the basis for this country, and that's the basis for any political party to emulate and go forward in that way. Simon Harris is new, and as the Minister for Health, he made some decisions that left a bit to be desired. And in that point of view, and this question of the Children's Hospital in James Street, it want to be forget about for children, use it for something else, and build a children's hospital in a green environment, as I